The real reason for green energy? China and Elon above the Cold War, Astra-Zeneca and Philips, Oopsies, and more. The Monica Perez Show starts now. Want to let you know that I am not going to be here the next couple of shows. I'm going to Jazz Fest in New Orleans, which is an annual tradition for me. I love it. But I do have some shows that I'm going to live stream on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 o'clock Pacific, 5 o'clock Eastern, as I always do. Stuff you haven't seen before. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you get together for the chat. That would be fun. Okay, let's see what we got here. I'm hoping that I am good to go on Rockfin. Let's see. Okay. All righty. China was in the news like so much today. So I have it's a little China heavy. I'm bored with some of the other stuff. So maybe I didn't grab the absolute top headlines. And here's another kind of obscure thing that I really don't know a ton of about, but it's like in every article. So I'm trying to learn. And this big article that was on the front page of the journal today, air conditioning and AI are demanding more of the world's power. Renewables can't keep up. Then the subtitle is Renewables Can't Keep Up with Growth, which means more coal and more emissions. But that's not really the gist of the story. And the fact that it leads with air conditioning and then in the article talks about human beings requiring air conditioning, and it shows pictures of like India, Latin America, China, places that have hot regions or mostly hot and are becoming more developed, and that the people are requiring more air conditioning. And it just shows the number of units, air conditioning units or houses that have air conditioning, like some weirdly curated graphic. But by the time I got to the bottom of the article, it basically the problem is the incredible amount of energy AI consumes, and then how much air conditioning it takes to keep that under control, to cool that, which is the same amount of energy as the AI itself. So there is a huge demand for energy here. And I immediately thought, like, so it looks to me what the pattern was is this is really highly speculative, totally, kind of conspiranoid, whatever. But let's just say either it's one or the other, but it's definitely happening, which is this. There was as this big, decades long push to get us to move away from fossil fuels and adopt all of these green energy solutions that are costly and inefficient. We are being kind of mandated. Our tax dollars are subsidizing electric vehicles, and even the electric vehicles are super polluting. And you can kind of see that they're going to end on the horizon, but not until after kind of gasoline cars are phased out. So you see this huge movement towards getting us to adopt this green energy, and at the same time pulling the fossil fuels offline. Like Germany pulled coal offline, even pulled nuclear offline, maybe permanently. I don't know for sure, but when Fukushima happened. So you've got this big shift, but now you have Germany going back to coal. We have nuclear. Like, this is all stuff I'm going to unpack for you. We have nuclear energy coming back into vogue, becoming part of the plan. So either we have the surplus energy now because we have all the fossil fuel that we wanted to, and they're like slagging on coal. We have 133 years left of coal at current rates of consumption, which actually could go up because of the AI thing, but it could go down because of technological advancements, which I think is probably what's really going to happen. So now they have plenty of fossil fuels, which they're going back to using. I think coal consumption is at its all-time high. So they have plenty of fossil fuels, and now they have all this green energy that we subsidize through our tax dollars and our behavior and all of that. And they either are just gobbling up all the surplus for AI or planning to, or perhaps this was anticipated for many years, because the whole idea of artificial intelligence is in itself many decades old, long before the green energy thing. So they might have been able to understand. And back then, in the 50s and the 60s, it did use a lot of energy just to have regular computers. So I mean, if anybody took the moment to think, like, what are the limits to AI, they would have thought, well, if a crappy little computer like this sucks up the energy of the entire building, what would all the calculations required for AI do? So I wouldn't put it past them to know, to have anticipated this and have thought about, we need to double energy production in the world. How are we going to do that? Along with many other goals for the green stuff and the climate and all of that. But it just occurred to me that it seems a little, things are dovetailing in a way that's also a little bit like hypocritical, because you hear the Silicon Valley crowd used to be libertarian, but now, of course, it's all woke crap. And you can see the little leaf, like, pay more for the same product and call it green. I think that's a Google initiative. And I just see all that stuff. And I think they're they're using all of this energy. Sorry, I'm having a bad hair day. um, they're using all of this energy for AI, and, like, the way I think of fossil fuels as being, warms people, it gets us from place to place to do our jobs, it eases our labor. AI is entirely artificial. Like, it's not moving anything. It's just thinking for us, which is not something I really want anything to do. I don't want this. I don't want this artificiality thrust upon us. And when you see things that our necessities are not scarce. Food, air, water, clothing, shelter, these are not scarce things. Therefore, they are not like crazy expensive. Anytime there's a need for it, you can just build it on the margin and divert resources to it. When you start getting to things that you don't really need, the market doesn't provide it. Stuff that's so incredibly expensive to, like, push over to the next level, the market won't provide that. So I actually came across many articles as I started to go down this path of things that we didn't really need and never would have had if it weren't for the government. And the next story I want to talk about in this regard is fracking. What fracking's doing is another article on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. I wasn't actually mining for these things. I was just reading the paper and digging in a little bit. But they are fracking is the product of vast subsidies and incentives since 1980. I have a great article that's actually pro the subsidies that I found in some, trade site that I'll put in the show notes here. Yeah, so and fracking is causing earthquakes. It's causing, like, real screwed up landscapes. The articles about Texas and New Mexico, and I don't know how I stumbled upon this, but they were talking about, like, 11-inch depressions in some areas, 5-inch, whatever lifts in some areas. Something like, the number of earthquakes in Oklahoma going from 14 to like 650, something crazy like that. And then I saw that in Long Beach, California, there are places where extracting the oil, I mean, I have to double check this. Extracting the oil made the land move by like 25 feet or something. I mean, that's like a sinkhole, right? So extracting stuff out of the earth is definitely going to disrupt the earth. But in these plains or whatever, in Oklahoma and Texas, and I think a little bit New Mexico, it's causing earthquakes, and it's pushing a lot of filthy water into the ground, which is also causing disturbances. That's actually probably what's they have to dispose of the water that the fracking generates, and so they push it back down into the ground. That's what causes the earthquakes. That's what risks contaminating the natural water table, all of that. It's pretty messed up, and it all comes from subsidies. So I say, and probably, actually, yes, it came also with some insulation from environmental regulations, and I wouldn't be surprised if they're insulated by liabilities as well. I just read an article about Astra-Zeneca, kind of no contesting some vax injuries. I don't know if I forget how much the settlement was, maybe $1 billion. I don't know. I'll get to it, but the government's insulating it. The government's paying it for them. Okay. jumping all over the place. I want to get back to some of the things I pulled on this AI article. I didn't even know this. Like I just was thinking about this, and lo and behold, a Musk quote, which will always make me think I'm on the path of whatever the psyop is. Musk said rising demand for power hungry AI chips could soon lead to an electricity shortage. Next year, you will see that they just can't find enough electricity to run all the chips, the Tesla CEO said at the Bosch Connected World Conference late last month. Talk about deep state meets deep state. Uh, um, yeah, Boston Consulting Group said the data center share of U.S. electricity consumption is expected to triple from 126 terawatt hours in 2022 to 390 by 2030. That's not very far from now. That's the equivalent usage of 40 million U.S. homes. And by the way, on that chart of home use of AC, they really stacked it weirdly. But if you look at it, the US is not adding units. So it doesn't look like it in any enough to show up on the chart. So adding 40 million US, the equivalent of that in energy consumption, greatly outpaces what we would actually use from what I could glean. Let's see what else. Oh, this was something interesting about AI. I don't think I mean it goes to the electricity thing, but I guess they don't call it a CPU, the AI, it's a GPU, which is like a graphics processing unit. And the GPU uses tons more energy. You don't need as many, but because this technological advancement has increased the demand for these chips, you don't need as many as you would for CPUs, but they do still want as many because of all the things it can do. But it not only it says the power usage will come from two fronts: an increase in the number of GPUs sold and the higher power draw from each GPU. And then, of course, it's all that extra air conditioning, which they are starting to try to install more cost-effective cooling systems. But they're saying that these places are in Virginia, they're in California, they're opening one in Ohio, maybe Nevada. In my mind, all of these should be in Canada, like where it's cold. I mean, that's the thing. I always think that's why like all the factories were in the north and the plantations. Obviously, the plantations were in the south because it's warm, but the factories were you couldn't have the factories near the plantations because it's too hot. So go back to the way it was before AC, where you put the hot stuff in the cold places. So, oh, but here is a tell. Here is a tell. Digital Bridge CEO Mark Ganzi says the obstacle facing the energy sector and future AI applications is the country's decades-old electric transmission grid. It isn't so much that we have a power issue, we have a transmission infrastructure issue. Power is abundant, but it's not efficiently transmitted or efficiently distributed. So this to me cracks the code on why they want to redo or contributes to the reason of why they want to redo the grid. So they're telling us, they're giving us brownouts, like forced blackouts, and trumping things up like they did in Texas, where like the freeze caused all that power outage. Like I don't think I think all of that stuff was avoidable. And when you dig into that story of the Texas, that terrible storm in the winter where all the power went out for days and days, it absolutely traces back to stupid decisions made, I would say, on purpose to create that crisis, especially since that crisis was foreshadowed even in some COVID documents. Why are they so desperate to redo the grid? I kept wondering why? And it could be that they cannot have this totally digital controlled society without AI as, and the essential factor, and that it requires a bigger grid, like a different grid. And we are just subsidizing this, through these psyops and our tax dollars. But it's a lot of electricity that we would need in this. It would add to the planet as much electricity as Sweden uses So they're saying it will require 15 more nuclear power plants or the equivalent of that. And that's just for the AI, not for the cooling. Let's see. Now, it is possible if they have more specialized AI that the actual energy the AI uses will go down, but it will proliferate. So anyway, but speaking of a nuclear power plant, so they just opened a nuclear power plant in Georgia, a very big nuclear power plant that headline was a massive U.S. nuclear power plant is finally complete. It might be the last of its kind. Cost overruns and delays at Southern Coast plant pushed U.S. nuclear power in a different direction. I think they added 2 reactors at a cost of $35 billion, if I'm not mistaken. There haven't been too many recently. It says there was one that was meant to be built in 2017 in South Carolina, but they scrapped it because of cost overruns. This thing came in at twice the original expectation and took many more years to finish than they thought. The most recent ones that were completed were in 2016 and 1996 by the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is government. So it doesn't really matter if it's cost overruns. So this terrible experience is being blamed in this article for changing the industry. Who knows? I'm sure the industry was going to change anyway because they have these things called small modular reactors where they are going to build factories that churn out nuclear reactors that they can then install in various places, probably near all these AI facilities. Your tax dollars at work, no doubt. Okay. It says in this article, both large and small nuclear projects need to be part of the solution to rising power demand in the U.S. And wouldn't you know it, federal tax credits are now available to nuclear power producers. The owners of existing plants can receive a production tax credit like wind farms. And for the first time, that's happening. But investment tax credits are also available for new projects. I mean, this is a top-down economy, and it's a crime against economics. It's a crime against liberty is what it is. And, I'm not like whatever. I recognize the anarcho-capitalists, the purpose of the anarcho-capitalists, proliferating those ideas as a stepping stone to world government. I do understand that. We've talked about that, I think. But it doesn't mean that I don't recognize the value of liberty, economic liberty, personal liberty. And this is just shaping our future with our money and without our consent in a way that, dare I say, is undemocratic. I hate that expression. All right. Another tell. In the US, SMR, small modular reactor projects could include Bill Gates, TerraPower, which plans to build its first reactor in Wyoming. And here was the tell. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman has backed Oklo, a nuclear fission startup that plans to go public through a merger with this special purpose acquisition company. So he's a SPAC, which means you raise money without telling people what it's going to be used for, even though I think these guys always know what it's going to be used for. And I think maybe they have to tell you the general idea. But nuclear fission has never been successfully used before. So I don't know what's going on with that, but this is a different article from the one about AI. So funny that this guy should pop in. Yes, and in other energy news, as I mentioned, fracking is bad. It seems bad to me. I'm sure people whose livelihoods depend on it would like to tell me that it's not bad. Maybe the costs outweigh or the benefits outweigh the costs. But the problem is it was subsidized on this end, and the supply was subsidized. And then the demand is being subsidized by the war in Ukraine. Like that's where all of this started. It was the democratically elected president in Ukraine did a deal with Russia, a financing deal and a gas deal. And I remember Hillary Clinton came out during her campaign against Trump in 2016 or during that time when she had the spotlight saying the thing people need to understand about Ukraine is Europe needs to buy LNG from us. or stop buying gas from Russia, which is the same as LNG from us, which is what's happening. So we've been subsidizing the demand side and the supply side. And that to me is just insane amounts of corporate corruption. That's not just shaping the world. That's really changing the world just to enrich these guys who will benefit from it. And I lay this squarely, up until the present time, at least, or at least on the supply side, at the feet of the Republicans. Like all those years that you heard, we need energy independence, blah, blah, blah. That again was like something that my libertarian mind couldn't really accept because especially energy, which is an international product and the private market for it, I understand like Rockefeller did terrible things, total crimes to button it up. But even, I mean, I knew a lot of regular people who owned farms in Oklahoma and Texas when I lived in Texas who got rich because they leased out their oil and gas, Pennsylvania too. So there are market mechanisms that work for that, but it's an international product, international demand for it. And, I would say just let that market happen. Don't, and not only do we subsidize the supply and demand in that example, but when we go over, when oil companies go, do nefarious things or make deals in Middle Eastern countries where you can't really expect their laws to reflect our laws, and then they expect the US Army to go in there and secure these assets that they knew the risks when they invested in those countries. So I'm totally against any interference on the, good side or the demand side, the supply side, um, at home or abroad in the energy market. And I think that it causes big problems. And it could be at the heart of everything that we're seeing right now, at least one of the pieces. So, what's happening in the Permian Basin is what the article is talking about in Texas and Oklahoma. Uh, it's, I mean, I think I already told you basically everything that is in this story. It's, what they do is they create these wells. It I believe they push the water in, or maybe the water is in there already. But when they pump, I think, yeah, they push the water in and then what comes back out, they basically flush out the oil. And then at the top, they separate back the water, the dirty water, super dirty water out, and they send the oil to refinery. And then they take that dirty water. Some of it they can reuse to continue the fracking process, but some of it they will dig down and just jam it back into that area like there's basically space for it down there still, but it doesn't really work out perfectly. One thing it can do is screw up their drilling, their wells, so they will sometimes drill way, way deeper and get it underneath there, and that's when they start causing earthquakes, screwing up the water, and, messing up the land. So, I don't know, there are ripple effects with things like that, earthquakes, but, to corrupt drinkable water and a water table, maybe Big T, they don't care because they wanna control all the water anyway. It's probably a win-win for them. But these local people, they probably get their jobs from this industry. They're really hesitant to object to it, but it looks like it's getting out of hand. And of course, like the punchline is they're asking the feds to come in. I'm thinking, what could possibly go wrong? But yeah, so the climate change stuff is BS, but pollution, this kind of thing, I'm not offering a policy solution. I'm just validating that some of this stuff is pretty bad. Okay, so we already talked a little bit about China and Musk, and now we'll bring them together as Musk just came home with a deal from China that it says Musk wins China's backing for Tesla's driver assistance service. Beijing gives tentative approval for car makers' tech in its second biggest market. So China is Tesla's second biggest market, and they have gotten permission to do this full self-driving FSD, and they're going to partner with a mapping and a bunch of other things company, Baidu, Baidu, which also does some driverless stuff. So it seems to me that, I mean, I'm just guessing that this is so Tesla can try this stuff out in China, which is probably easier to manage than here because here Tesla and Ford actually are being investigated for some of these accidents. If I have time, I'll tell you about that. Uh, so so my guess is that he's sharing his tech with Baidu. One thing that was and he's using it as experimental over there, probably not as regulatorily rigid. But there was a big give on Musk's part in that it is not clear, which means to me the answer is no, that he can bring the data that he collects back to educate, inform his own algorithm at Tesla. So I guess the Chinese think of data of any kind as a national security thing, and they will not let him take it out, it seems like. But what this story made me think about, reminded me of, was many, many different books I've read that point to the same thing. One is Prolonging the Agony, which I'm reading now, which is about extending World War One. Another thing, Conjuring Hitler, about World War II by Guido Preparata. The Bolsheviks and that Anthony Sutton book, the Bolshevik Revolution, I think. I think it was called that, or maybe it has a longer title than that. Even Major Jordan's Diary and Oppenheimer. These are all examples of how you've got a war that is killing people, that is sucking up all your tax dollars, that's scaring you, and that's changing the world. And business is going on above that level between the belligerents. So in Prolonging the Agony, it's about how England made sure that the US and their, corporate partners could sell the raw materials for war still to Germany, even though actual material was contraband, was not allowed to be sold, which prolonged the war, which prolonged the profits, but also sold the stuff. I mean, it's very involved, but there's a lot of that. And Conjuring Hitler talks about how the money flows never stop. There's no walls in the money flow, even though there's front lines, in the real world. And the Bolshevik Revolution was how American corporations were cutting deals with the Bolsheviks before the Tsar was dead, probably. That was terrible. I have been to Tsar Nicholas's and his family's grave twice and cried both times. It's very freaky. Okay. So, I feel like that's what the real takeaway for that is that, we have this Cold War going on, and the most subsidized US company ever probably is cutting deals with the Chinese government on stuff like data sharing and tech sharing. That's, the subject of the, highest level congressional legislation, which, by the way, TikTok. Hold on, but I'll just say, yeah, I told you Tesla's autopilot caused more than a dozen fatalities, hundreds of crashes. It's being investigated by the National Transportation Safety Board. I think the Ford Mustang maybe was in crashes that killed 2 people, but even after a recall and a revamp, these cars still just people feel overconfident and they need to be paying attention to the road. And supposedly the car, keeps an eye on your eyes, but I guess it doesn't keep an eye on your brain. So people are just checking out and crashing and dying and killing people. And I guess that's, they have to look like they're looking into it. So no, but okay, TikTok. This is how I read this. I read this article. ByteDance would rather die than sell TikTok. They would rather die than sell TikTok to Steve Mnuchin. It does say ByteDance says it will not sell TikTok, that the algorithm that is embedded in TikTok and all of that is, even though it is essential to ByteDance overall, and TikTok is only a small portion of ByteDance's revenue. So they they might just pull out of the US, which I think would be awesome. Just only because I would hate to see not even because I dislike it, but I I think it's outrageous what they're doing, that they're forcing TikTok because I really feel like they're literally forcing them to sell it to Steve Mnuchin, which is fucking outrageous. Anyway, um, okay, another thing, that is happening. Oh, I think it's time. See, I didn't set my little alarm. I think it's time for some comments. All right, let us see what we got here. Hello, everyone. See, I have to go all the way back. So it's going to be a little dead air. You guys chat amongst yourselves. Hi, Stella. Stella is in the suburbs of Australia. So I'm sorry. I usually say that this show starts at on Tuesday at 2 o'clock Pacific time and 5 o'clock Eastern, but I should probably say 2 o'clock Pacific, 7 a.m. Wednesday, Australia. So that Stella can make it. She said she was woken up by a mooing cow. I guess that's why she was on time. Hi, Stuart. Hey, JC. Mark says maybe we can use environmental standards to jettison the military industrial complex. Well, I have to say, every time I dig into such things, it seems that the exact industries that are the worst for everything are the ones that are exempted from such scrutiny. Oh, nice. Mark gives us a little link to embrace the free market for cleanest energy from libertyeconomics.com. Very nice. Thank you. Stella had an AI, her first AI chat last week. It ended up apologizing for being wrong and thanked her for correcting it. She has the transcript. It cuts off at November 2021. I'm not sure I get that, but yes, of course it thanked you for correcting it. You're educating it. That's what we're doing. And we were just talking about that in Union of the Unwanted last night, how and I think we knew that capture was educating AI. I think like people figured that out a while ago, but it wants to know what a bicycle is, but it also wants to know what you think a bicycle is. And if you fall for what it's telling you a bicycle is, even though it's not really a bicycle, I don't know. Its data cutoff point was November 2021. Really interesting. Kat is here. Hello, hello. Samantha says the company that can most effectively optimize energy consumption while maintaining or enhancing AI performance is likely to gain a significant competitive advantage. Okay, Samantha, I will see that and I will raise you and say if it's not one of the bigs, the government will come in and pay for it. They'll get free energy. Like I just or they'll be patent raped or something. Yes, Mark says, electricity shortages will be from deliberate government policy rationing energy. Yes, I think that that is what's happening, but I think it's so that we will think it's our own fault that we need to revamp the grid or that it's naturally happening. If all the utility companies in the whole country said like we need to subsidize AI by basically, to redo the grid is probably going to be quite disruptive and costly. And who knows if it'll be superior for our needs while is superior for theirs. Maybe it will be dangerous with all those little nukes. So yes, I think that's what's going on here. Yes, Samantha, I thank you for that. I did read that they are working on other cooling methods such as liquid cooling, evaporative cooling, immersion cooling, geothermal cooling, and heat recovery systems. Now, heat recovery systems would be great. Like the way they do sewage plants right now is the methane gets that the human waste produces is captured and runs the plant. So that would be awesome. I mean, I can't help but think that given the pattern that I'm seeing, that no matter what they do, they will just expand this thing to meet any available energy they can figure out how to produce. They will get all the surplus. Brownouts are a sure sign of the shit hitting the fan. Jack, yes, the grid quote can't handle the means to our dystopian future, and it's all our fault. See, I could have cut the show by 10 minutes if I had just had that that nice summary. I know Stewart points out, no, no, the brownouts are due to climate change. Clint, we will all be Clint's got a good one here. We will all be slaves fanning robots as they lay on the beach and sip motor oil cocktails. That is straight out of the Jetsons, and I'm not surprised. It doesn't take as long to build nuclear reactors in China. Yes, I can imagine, and it will probably go that way too. Stella points out those beaches will be underground. Stella makes a good point. Bill Gates' terror power. It was, I believe, Terra power, but that's cute. That's cute. I'm sure that he gets a huge chuckle out of that. Wonders if anyone noticed. Uh the best Samantha says the best name for ChatGPT that I've heard so far is quote mansplaining as a service. If you played with it, this should make sense. No gender insult intended. What is the carbon monoxide output of a Patriot missile? They don't even care about carbon monoxide. That's the thing. Carbon monoxide is poison. Carbon dioxide is what the stuff of life, and that's what they want to get rid of. That's what annoys me about this stuff. Fracking, pollution, all the things that are bad. The plastic island, plastic's bad. It's bad. It's a bad thing to put food and water in. I mean, just you don't have to regulate it. Just make sure everybody knows that. Don't alleviate the liability from the petroleum industry or whomever is responsible for the plastic. Don't alleviate the liability on health, for example. They'd stop using it. They put chemicals in the water that breaks up the shale. I see. So it's really bad water. It's bad water. Yikes. Military are the biggest polluters, Stella says. JC points out the government always excludes itself as a major polluter. They don't actually care about the environment, of course. Silicon Valley, too, apparently. They just want to control it along with us and use whatever rhetoric will help them. Mark says, "Hi, Monica. Georgia here. One of my most memorable moments was meeting you. I wonder, Mark, if that was 7 years ago today, because I was at the Harp Pub in Roswell doing an on-site. What did they used to say that? On location? I can't remember. But yeah, those are really fun times. That when I used to do the meetups in Georgia, that was super fun. And I loved the disappearing patron parties during lockdown. That was fun too. Stella set the alarm for this show. Thank you. But the cow beat it to her. Okay, Mark. I think Mark said this 3 times. Are there cafe standards on tanks? I don't think so. I finally get it. I was not getting it. Yes, I'm sure. Tanks, I wonder how many cars. Oh, so AI will use more electricity than all electric vehicles. So all the electric vehicles that they expect to be running in this country in 2030, that amount of electricity will be less than, I mean, maybe even like a sixth of what the AI expectation is. Oh, this is interesting. I think we might be getting too in the weeds for any podcast listeners. So hopefully, my trusty producer, Bobby, will cut some of this stuff out. But Stella is saying, I was asking AI about the major flooding in the Emirates in April, but it said there was no such event. And then it had to confess that November 2021 was his data cutoff. So that just shows it's kind of like Edward Snowden's revelations. He revealed stuff that was all already revealed, and even if it wasn't, which I totally could at the time, I used to have this running thing every time he came up with something, I would find the RT article on it from the year before, but even if it weren't already out there, it was already within the realm of possibility, and if he were really super spy in the NSA, he'd be telling us stuff that was 10 years out. He would have been telling us this, "Watch out for AI, it's going to gobble up all your electricity." All right. Oh, Noble, I was thinking about you. I've been uh craving a trip to England, and if I go, I will come see you. Stella says, yes, plastic is one of the top problems. Yes. And that's another thing that libertarians, you get blinded to the fact that problems that drive policy initiatives that we don't like may still be problems. And I think from economic points of view, uh, environmental points of view, social points of view, all the things that are outside the realm of government policy to a libertarian, which is basically, my position still, are still important and they need addressing. They need acknowledgement. They need discussion. They need, they need an ideas about it. So, okay, let me see if I've got anything more here. And you know what? I am sure that I know Bobby left me a clip, but I cannot find it. And he has little family emergency. So if you happen to pray, remember Bobby, if you would, and his dad in your prayers. Speaking of praying, so I'll get back to a couple of more articles. But first, let me just say this little personal thing. So I have some listener friends and some of them are here. And when I say that, I don't mean like all my, my friends, you're all my friends. I mean, I have friends who I met through this show and I've been to their houses, they've been to my house, or we text all the time, talk on the phone. Like the majority of, maybe I have a dozen friends, more than half of them I met through the show. And one of them is my friend Carol, who you heard she's from Athens, and she was, I think I'm doxing her. Okay, roll that back. My friend texted me and pointed something out that I had not realized before, and I'm going to stop saying this. I always say, and it's true, that I cannot imagine dying and having a conversation with God where, like, I have my name, he knows my name. It's just out of the realm of possibility in my mind. I can't imagine it. And she pointed out to me that that's actually addressed in the Bible. And I can't remember where. I have her text somewhere, but we text a lot. I'd have to scroll. So I'm just going to pull this off of just some random blog. The Bible passages that she was quoting, I believe. Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. There may be a version that actually says, I knew your name. And then in Luke, in the New Testament, why even the hairs on your head are all numbered. So when she reminded me of this, I remembered that my father used to say that all the time, that if God stopped thinking about you for a second, you would disappear and nobody would even remember you ever existed. So me and all of my brothers and sisters were like, did we have more brothers and sisters that we don't know about? Am I going to disappear at any moment? Uh, so I would say it is a tenet of faith to believe this. So I am going to not take lightly that assertion, and I'm going to try a little harder to uh, accept that, and certainly not go out of my way to pay lip service to not accepting it. And then, just as a weird synchro, right after this, and probably because of this, she sent me a book, Psalms. And I'm going to say this, I've had Catholics tell me it's not true. I was never did Bible study. We don't, I just don't, when you go to church, they're basically reading you the Bible. And she also sent me a Bible in chronological order, which is super, super cool. Anyway, I'd never read, she said as a kid, she got a book of Psalms. It was her first religious book she ever got. I got no such book. So she sends me this book, and when I used to have a cup of tea, I would call my mom. So my friend Krista was like, I was like sad because I couldn't do that. She's like, well, just say a prayer. So I say a prayer to Saint Monica for my siblings to return to the church and other people too. Mostly because I think we would get along better if we did that. So anyway, I said, okay, well, today, instead of doing that, I'll read this book that Carol gave me. And I'm just going to set the timer for like 5 minutes. I'm just going to read 5 minutes so it doesn't feel like oppressive, that I got to like accomplish something here. So I only got through like 2 or 3 Psalms because I was reflecting. The second Psalm happened to be, I had been in church that day to say a prayer of Thanksgiving for something, or went to Mass for Thanksgiving. And I never remember the Psalms. I can never remember, like, you have to repeat after the priest, the Psalm, and I never remember it. But that day I did remember it, and I thought, wow, I don't know why this Psalm is sticking with me. And of course, it was the second Psalm. So within a span of about an hour, I got a total synchro with Carol, and that was on the heels of her telling me God does know your name. So I'm gonna work on that personally, and let us finish the few stories I have left. I don't know why I pulled this one. McDonald's is growing in leaps and bounds in China. Oh, I think I think I did it because of the crazy stuff they serve. One of the challenges for McDonald's in China is its rival called Tasty N, which caters to local appetites with inexpensive burgers made of Peking duck, sounds good, spicy tofu, okay, and fish flavored pork. Oh, blah. I'm not even crazy about fish flavored fish. I love fish, but if it smells like fish, I'm like, ooh. Okay. Its logo is Chinese stomachs love Chinese burgers. Not to be outdone, Chicago-based McDonald's has been offering new creations such as wraps made of chicken and pickled bamboo shoots, which actually sounds great. Coca-Cola flavored chicken wings. Who knew that was a Chinese thing? And a sandwich made of, get ready, Spam and Oreo cookie crumbs. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. All right. I told you this thing about AstraZeneca. They admit that it says, the article says AstraZeneca admits its COVID vaccine can cause a rare side effect. It admits this for the first time in these court documents. The side effect is, I mean, I know what it is, but I want to make sure I have a few here. They're saying it's super, super rare, yada, yada. The first case lodged last year by Jamie Scott, a father of 2, who was left with permanent brain injury after developing a blood clot and a bleed on the brain that has prevented him from working. After he received the vaccine in April 2021. This happened the day after he got the jab. The hospital called his wife 3 times to tell her that her husband was going to die. Zeneca has contested the claims, but accepts that in very rare cases, this thing causes the TSS. It says TTS stands for thrombosis and thrombocytopenia syndrome, which causes people to have blood clots and low platelet count. 51 cases have been lodged in the high court by victims and grieving relatives. Damages estimated to be 100 million pounds. All right. It says AstraZeneca's admission made in a legal defense to Mr. Scott's high court claim follows intense legal wrangling. It could lead to payouts if the drug firm accepts the vaccine was the cause of serious illness and death. In specific legal cases, the government has pledged to underwrite AstraZeneca's legal bills. That is a moral hazard. This pissed me off. Independent studies show, first of all, that pisses me off. Definitely not independent, show the AstraZeneca vaccine was incredibly effective in tackling the pandemic, saving more than 6 million lives globally in the first year of the rollout. Okay, first of all, that's proving a negative, which you can't do. Second of all, I totally, I question that, and I'll tell you why. I'm pretty sure I did not read anything about AstraZeneca in the FDA. I don't think that was one that was available here, but I used to read. At one point, I could say I read every single bit of the published trial data on the FDA's website. So there were trials for that. I don't know if it was Pfizer or Moderna or J&J, but I think it was Pfizer that I read. But I read more than one. So I read more than one of the vaccines. And the study I had read, there was a control group and there was an experimental group gets the vaccine, the control group doesn't. In the entire study, which was hundreds of people, I talked about it on the air, only one person died of COVID in either group. So the groups that they were doing these studies on, and I never saw any revised group subset, because what they did was they excluded any vulnerable people from the studies, even though it was the vulnerable people they gave the first round to, which was weird. So there was nobody in those studies, and I think those were the definitive studies, at least not for the AstraZeneca one, but for the other stuff, where the people in the study were not dying of COVID. They took a healthy group and it didn't kill any of them. Maybe one person died. So to say that the vaccine saved lives, you would have to, at the very least, have a controlled study of a cohort where people in the placebo group died and people in the experimental group did not. So I don't accept that. And, I don't see the study, so it doesn't tell me all the caveats they put into that study or all the inferences they make. Anyway, this was great. The vaccine, heralded at its launch by Boris Johnson as a triumph for British science, is no longer used in the UK. I actually have this says figures show that out of 163 payouts made by the government in February this year for vaccine injury or death, I can't tell from this, at least 158 went to the AstraZeneca people. So almost all of them. I actually added a glossary entry to MonicaPerezShow.com called the AstraZeneca effect, because every single one of the variations in the beginning, there were 5 identified variants. One was in Japan, but the Japanese AstraZeneca study was suspended, there were 5 AstraZeneca trials in 5 different places. The Japanese one was suspended. The other 4 were ground zero for each one of those variants. I'm not kidding. It was like Brazil, Kenya, someplace in England, I think. I can't remember, but it was 141. You can look it up. It's called the AstraZeneca effect on my website. So AstraZeneca, bad. Oh, and the last thing I have to get to it because I teased it in the title, is Philips agrees to $1 billion U.S. ventilator settlement The company made a disclosure as it reported net loss. Okay, so Philips shares skyrocketed after they revealed they only had to pay $1 billion for this class action suit against them for ventilators, not for like COVID ventilators, but for sleep apnea ventilators. I guess like a CPAP machine. Um, a sleep apnea machine that has foam in it that can degrade and release harmful gas into users' lungs. It says since April 2021, that's not that long ago, 3 years, the FDA has received more than 116,000 MDRs, medical device reports, including 561 reports of death that were either reported or suspected to be related to problems with the insulating foam in the Philips devices. That's according to the uh, FDA. And so I'm not sure that this means that Philips is off the hook for any further damages. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, apparently, the market likes certainty. And by the way the stock responded, seems like they got off easy. But one of the reasons I'm bringing this story is maybe you're entitled, but because I started getting some weird thing. I didn't know what it was, but I'm certain it was apnea because it's apnea. It was like like you wake up in the middle of the night, like not being able to breathe. And uh so I got a wedge. I've talked about this before, but everyone should know about this. I don't know if it's a 5-degree angle or it's 5 inches on one side. It's something like that, but it's pretty, mild incline that you jam under your mattress. It's like $100. I'll put it in the show notes. Got it on Amazon. I think it's called, I don't know. I can't see the brand that I got, but whatever. I never had a single episode of that apnea again, and my husband, his snoring has cut back by like 90%. I don't think, I think if you've got it bad and you've had it for a long time, I'm not sure you can uh totally this will be a complete solution, but I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. And I feel like there's no harm done. All right, well, I think I maybe overstayed my welcome, but we did a lot of comments and it was fun. So, and I don't have a clip. So, anyway, all right, my people. Now, remember, I'm not going to be here the next couple of Tuesdays and Thursdays, just 2 I'm going to miss. But I have a great conversation that I had with Freedom Convo. I have my definitive, I think my MH370 thing is going to be on there. I might have that interview I did with Ricky and the guy who did the Netflix documentary on Danny Castellaro. It was an interesting conversation. I'm gonna put it up. But this book is now $500, so it's over the target. This is The Octopus, Secret Government, and the Death of Danny Castellaro, which I am planning to actually read into this microphone so that you guys can hear it. But these are some of the things that are coming up. I hope you enjoy them. I'm going to Jazz Fest and I'm super excited. I really need a time away. Anyway, I love you guys. Thank you for coming.